Hey everybody, I am Faith Madden, and this is the updated version of my testimony with my parents. So, when I was born, I was 1 pound and 9 ounces, sorry, and I died and came back to life, and I hope that you're blessed by this story. So, here we go.
All right. Well, I think it's really neat that Faith does these testimonies because in Revelation it does say that the power that the enemy actually was overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And so, us as Christians that follow Jesus, it's very important that we testify about what God's done in our lives. So, I'm really proud that you do that, Faith. So, you want me to start just what happened?
Yeah.
Okay. So, the year was 2004. Oh my, long time ago. Man, I had less gray hair then. In fact, the first gray hair I ever found was after you were born, like right after that. And it was 2004, and the date was February the 16th, and we had just got back from a routine checkup for the pregnancy. And Faith was 26 weeks along, and you'd had some contractions and things that we were a little concerned about, and they had discovered an abnormality within the uterus, and so we were a little bit concerned. But the doctor said that same day that everything was good to go. We're fine. The contractions were just normal, and they weren't anything to worry about. They were just kind of a false labor contraction. And I remember that night we came back to our little trailer that we had rented in Cedro-Woolley, Washington, and the thing I remember was that I was on the internet. We had just bought a four wheeler, and I was just kind of surfing the internet, reading some stuff on a forum. And you were starting to moan and groan a bit. You were in the bed, and you were telling me that you were being bothered by these contractions. And I kept telling you, well, the doctor said it's fine, so I guess it's fine. And
Right, so I was 26 weeks along. They had already discovered through ultrasound that there was some type of septum or scar tissue that was inside of my uterus impeding the room that Faith had to grow. And so we knew that there were issues, but we didn't know to what extent. Like you said, we had just gone to the doctor. She assured us that these were Braxton Hicks contractions, to go home, to relax, that everything was fine. And so I'm laying in the bed, and the contractions are getting worse. And so eventually I decided I needed to time them to see how far apart they really were. And so once I realized that they were increasing and they were only a few minutes apart, I came to you and said, I don't care what the doctor said. I know that there's an issue. We have to get to the hospital.
yep. And so we jumped in the truck and we ran straight to the Mount Vernon Hospital. And did your doctor actually show up there? I think your doctor did show up there. Your
I think she did.
doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And they found out really quick that this was not Braxton Hicks contractions, that we were going into labor. We had a major problem, and so they gave you some magnesium or something to slow or stop the labor.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were ready to send us out of there. They didn't want to deal with this at Mount Vernon. They said that it was much better to go to the University of Washington in Seattle, and that they would transfer you as soon as you could get stable enough to do that. So within
Right.
very very short amount of time, they put you in an ambulance, and I was chasing the ambulance, and it was a 1 hour drive to the hospital, and we hauled tail straight to the hospital.
Right. So it was a blessing because the medication that they gave me did stop the contractions for a while. It gave us time to make it in the ambulance to the hospital in Seattle. And as soon as they got me stable there, they wanted to do another ultrasound. And so we thought that maybe I would be able to continue with my pregnancy, but the ultrasound showed that I had cord prolapse. So at that
Which
moment,
means what?
so the cord was trapped near the birth canal, which meant that Faith had little to no oxygen.
So
at
like
all.
kinking a water hose kind of was
Mm-hmm.
going on, and that was her lifeline, life support system, and it was being kinked, and so they had to quickly move into action.
So we knew that the situation was even more of an emergency, and that she was going to have to be delivered immediately by C-section if she had any chance at all to survive. And at this point, they didn't know how long she had been without oxygen.
And so it was minutes from when we arrived at the hospital in the University of Washington in Seattle that we were having this quick decision to be made to go to surgery.
Right. So I can remember that moment that, I told Jason goodbye. There was no time to prep him to be able to go in the operating room. Told him goodbye, and I looked at the clock, and it was 12:55 a.m. And later I realized that Faith was born at 1:02 a.m.
And so let me jump in and say what was happening while I was waiting. So I looked at the clock as well, and it had just went past 1 as they wheeled y'all back, I guess. And not very many minutes went by, and I was all alone, but I was never alone. It's really important for people to have a relationship with Jesus before tough times are upon you, because that's the only way to be ready for when things are tough. And so I was all alone. I didn't have any family members, no one around me, and I'm just standing there looking at the clock. But I didn't feel alone at all. And I'd made phone calls and said, hey, pray. This is very serious, pray. But I don't remember being afraid at all. I just remember being ready for a battle. Mm-hmm. And so I just prayed. And the time just clicked by. I could hear the clock ticking. I'm sitting there alone, and I'm praying. I'm trusting the Lord. And then minutes later, they come out.
So in the meantime, within 7 minutes, they had delivered Faith. And that was miraculous in itself that they were able to deliver her so quickly. But when she was born, she had an APGAR score of 0.
What does that mean?
So you had no heartbeat, you were not breathing, you were blue, you were dead.
Yeah.
And so then in comes the life-saving techniques that they used, but more than that, in comes Jesus. And in that moment, Jesus gave you back to us and brought you back to life.
Yeah.
And I could never be more grateful and thankful for the people, the doctors that God put in place at that moment to be the hands and feet of Jesus in saving your life and bringing you back to life.
Yeah, and so they did infant CPR, so I imagine they must have been just using one finger because she was so tiny. It was hard to explain, but my ring, which is a size, I think a 9 or something, and my ring would fit on her wrist like a watch or a bracelet, something like that. And she was so tiny. And anyway, she was so tiny, and they revived her, but more importantly, the Lord was holding her in His hands right in those moments, and He was the one that was performing the necessary move that was needed for her to be brought back to us. And so we had a position with the Lord, and we didn't make deals with the Lord. I wouldn't say that I made a deal with Him, but I did promise Him this. I made a promise. I said, Lord, if you let me raise her, let me have her, then I will give her back to you. I will teach her all about you, and I will give her back to you to minister to the world. And so we had named her Faith, and that was already in place. We had planned that name. I chose her name, I think, Heather, this time, and the Lord just gave me that name, that Faith. And so when Faith was born, she was already named, and I told the Lord, I said, I'd love to get to know her. I want to be her father on this earth and get to know her. And He said, well, you don't even know her. I know her already, but you don't even know her. You say you want to keep her, but you don't even know her. I said, well, I want to, though. I'd like to. But I didn't make a deal with the Lord. I just promised Him that if you let me keep her, then I'm raising her for you. And I'm going to always point to you with her life. And so, obviously, you can see today she's almost 17 years old, and everything's fine. Everything's doing well.
I think the only thing bad that I got out of that was a lazy eye, which I guess couldn't be prevented, but
Well, and we got to go over some more things, but about the lazy eye, that's kind of a funny thing because I have really poor vision, nearsightedness, and I have a minus, around a minus 450 right eye, and I let her put my glasses on the other day, and it was pretty funny because I said, "You can't see through my glasses, Faith, with your good eye. It'll make your good eye not able to focus." And she could see perfectly well through my minus 450.
Yeah, my right eye is just really powerful, I guess, because any pair of glasses I put on, my eye will adjust and it'll be clear. So it's crazy.
So it really is crazy because if you put on my glasses, I can promise you, if you don't need my glass prescription, you will be looking through just a complete blurred vision, like you had sawdust in your eye. It's pretty cool. But back to that situation at the hospital. So we're at the NICU. Well, we're not at the NICU yet. We're at the emergency surgery location for pregnant moms. And so minutes pass. They wheel Faith out. They wheeled Heather out separately, and she was groggy from the surgery, and she's laying there herself, can't even sit up yet, really.
Mm-hmm.
And as she's laying there, they said, "Okay, well, your daughter's going to come through here." And they thought she probably wasn't going to live, I think. So they were really wanting to give us a chance to get to see her alive. And so here she's coming, and they have this oxygen on her. She had to go on a ventilator, immediately, pretty much. But they had oxygen blowing in her nose at this point, and mouth. And they wheeled her by, and they said, "Okay, here, we're going to stop for a second." They stopped, and Faith was just struggling. Her chest was just heaving, trying to breathe. You could tell it was such a struggle to breathe. There's such a strength in her, even as a tiny little baby, just so tiny. And she was breathing and trying to breathe, and we just touched her, I think, for the first time, and just on her hand, and Heather reached in, and she just touched your hand, and she just said, "So sweet." That's the first word she said to you. So it's pretty awesome, pretty powerful moment. I'll always remember when she just said, "So sweet." And Faith was so sweet. She still is. And so they wheeled her on past, and they took her to the NICU. What a wonderfully horrible, great place.
Yeah.
So they took her in there. There was quite a bit of time passed. They had to do a lot of things to her before we could go in and see her.
Right. And I remember those first few days and those first few weeks being really tough because Faith was so small and so fragile and so weak that we could not hold her. We could barely touch her through the incubator, but we certainly couldn't put her next to our skin because her skin was too sensitive. In fact, so sensitive that she couldn't even wear clothes for the first few weeks of her life. And so she laid in that incubator alone without even clothes on for weeks. And
on a ventilator the first 3 days or so. It was a miracle. She got off the ventilator within like 3 days. They prepared us for the worst. They said, "Well, she's probably, look, we're not out of the woods. We're not." They kept on and on. We're never, never safe. We're never out of the woods.
right,
And she'd quit breathing while you were there with her. Like, remember? And we'd just tap her on the back, and she'd start breathing again. But they had a ventilator, then a CPAP. Finally graduated to oxygen. It was like a great day to graduate to oxygen. And
right.
go ahead.
Other things I remember, the long list that they gave us to expect to have happen in the NICU. She will get these types of infections. She will get these types of setbacks. These things are to be expected. And, God brought us through that time.
With nothing.
Without any setbacks, without any infections, without any sicknesses, without any drawbacks.
Oh, she'll get RSV, but she did not.
Yes. And so just the hand of God over us in that situation is just more powerful than I can even explain in words. And, going back to those times where we couldn't hold her and how devastating that was to us. And I know you have a testimony
And so that
about
was pretty powerful. So and it it has resonated for the last 17 years since this happened. But we're in there, and I'm just feeling compassion because she doesn't get to be held, and she had been inside of her mother's womb next to her mom the whole time, and even probably was well accompanied or accustomed to my voice being next to her, singing. I'd play the guitar and sing for her, and we were always, right there on top of her. And now she's alone. And so I'm praying next to this incubator, and I spoke to Jesus, and I want to encourage you, if you don't speak to him, give it a shot. He's real. He's still alive today, and he hears every word. And so I spoke to him, and I said, Jesus, hold her, because we can't. So she needs to be held. In that moment, the Lord took my voice and spoke back to me out of my own mouth. I didn't say anything, and I heard myself say, I already am. But it wasn't me that spoke, it was him. The word says that he comes to dwell within this temple, this body. And he was in this temple, and he said, I already am. I'm holding her. And so I felt foolish, and I was like, of course you are. I was like, duh,
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a powerful moment, and felt the Holy Ghost just descend on the room, and then after that.
So God really brought us through that time. Faith stayed in the NICU for 10 weeks. She came home before her due date, and God just brought her through that without any type of long-term effects or learning disabilities or anything like that. And she's just a miracle to us. And so by the time Faith was 2 years old, we had moved back home to Louisiana. And I remember one day we were standing on the front porch of our house, and it was about to rain, and you could smell the rain coming. You could smell the moisture in the air, and you could just sense that it was almost here. And so Faith looks at me at 2 years old. She had just started to talk, and she's like, Mama, what's that smell? And I said, well, that's the smell of rain. It's about to rain. You can smell it coming. And she said, no, Mama, that's the smell of Jesus. That's what Jesus smells like.
And about 2 years ago, when I was in just class, I was just randomly thinking about Lord, what did you mean why do you smell like that? And he told me, because I'm the living water.
Yes,
So
living
it
water.
makes perfect
Yeah.
sense,
Right. So I asked her, I said, Faith, so Jesus smells like the rain? How do you know that? And she explained to me, well, that's what he smelled like when he was holding me in the hospital after I was born. Yeah. And I said, well, what else do you remember during that time? And at 2, not being told anything about her story and just recently starting to talk, she told me that she remembered being pricked by so many needles.
Yep.
So many needles in the hospital as an infant. And that just solidified to me more than ever that what she was telling me was the truth.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that had been fed to her, told to her.
Yeah.
She was telling me real memories that God had allowed her to remember in order to give a testimony to his goodness during that time of holding her.
Do you remember she actually said, Jesus held me. She said that to us as it barely able to talk. And she said, Jesus held me. Mm-hmm. And so she said when she was in the hospital, Jesus held her, and she articulated that somehow as a 2-year-old too. So,
right.
That was incredible. And then time passed.
So time passed, and Faith was 11 years old, and the movie Heaven is for Real came out. And so we like watching movies together as a family, and so we loaded up and went to our local cinema and watched that movie together. And the theater is about an hour's drive from our home, and so we had a good bit of a drive on the way back home that night. And we were just talking about the movie, and then Faith started sharing even more.
Yeah, she said, I remember more, Daddy. I remember more about when Jesus held me in the hospital.
Yeah, so at the end of the movie, there's this painting that this girl did, and it was a painting of Jesus. And as soon as I saw that painting and I looked into the eyes of Jesus, basically, I had this vision of Jesus holding me and in the hospital room beside the incubator. And he was sitting on this chair. It was kind of like a mixture of a pew, like a church pew, my grandma's church pew, and a chair with wheels. So I didn't really know how to explain it to Daddy, but he eventually figured it out. So.
Yeah, so I was scratching my head. She said a church, Mama Ann's, that's my mom, Mama Ann's church pew and a chair with wheels, a kind of a mixture. And I was like, well, that's strange. That seemed something like out of a Dr. Seuss book. I thought I was just seeing some funny looking picture of that. And then the Lord showed me a clear picture of what Faith was seeing. The year, or about 2 years before Faith was born, I was given a chair with wheels on it, an office chair that had the same color cushion as my the Mountain Zion Church of God pews that are a reddish tint fabric, and of course with wheels on it. And this thing was an ugly chair, but my friend Phil Detweiler told me it was a good, comfortable chair, so I took his advice and got the chair. And so we threw the chair out. I think we gave it away or sold it at a garage sale by the time Faith was a year old or so. It was gone. She would never, she would have not had any memory of that chair, but that was my chair. And so backing up, rewinding to 5 minutes or so into this video, we were talking about the Lord Jesus spoke through me and said, I already am holding her. I am holding her. Well, he was sitting in my chair. He was sitting in my position, taking up the cross yet again for me to bear my daughter and be her father while I couldn't hold her. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's full circle. It's complete. And it probably is not even complete yet, y'all. There's probably things yet to be revealed about the future of what God's plan is for Faith's life. But it was completely understandable to me that the Lord sat in my chair, being her. Remember, he said to me, I already know her. You don't even know her. I know her. And so he was sitting in my chair. And so even to this day, he sits in my chair, fulfilling the things that I can't fulfill for Faith. And he was being the gracious father to her that I wanted to be. And eventually I was able to hold her. And she doesn't really like to be held too much. But she lets me hold her sometimes.
So Faith really thought that it would be important for us to get together and share her testimony with all of you from our perspective and from her perspective. And so we hope that you were blessed by it. And we hope that this helps draw you closer to Jesus in some way. Okay.
And if you have any questions about this, feel free to comment them. And let me know if this video has moved you and what God shows you through it. And
so, by the way, Faith was supposed to be blind and deaf and have cerebral palsy and have all kinds of issues or whatever. Like they expected her to have just tons of things. I don't know if it was that, but it was a bunch of disabilities. She was supposed to have a bunch of disabilities. And to date, the only thing we can come up with is one eye she can't see great with, but the other eye is a Superman eye. So she doesn't even need glasses. They said no contact, no glasses, no nothing. She plays tennis. She doesn't have any struggles related to any of that. And so there was an 85% chance that she was supposed to be, just have a numerous amount of disabilities and problems. And yet she don't have really any to talk of.
No.
So pretty amazing. God had a plan. God has a testimony, and everything works out for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. And our testimony, that's where the power is at. You can hear the testimony and feel the power of the Lord moving in your life.
So thank you for watching. I love you guys, and most of all, God loves you.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.